Ah. Good morning, Dr. Estes Room. Yeah, I'm back. I was getting some agua and some cafe. Good morning, Benny. Good morning, Hash Brown Swag. Hey, Jenna. Good morning to you. Are you guys ready for Thanksgiving? Hey, happy Monday, MCAT. Hash Brown can't wait for Thanksgiving. I can't wait either. Now, Jenna, what amazing food are we talking about here? Is there a favorite that you have? I want some stuffing. The turkey my parents make is the best. So are you saying that they don't dry it out to high heaven? They just don't. It's very hard not to dry out turkey. Hey, good morning, Belka. Abhinav says UB isn't having international student exchange with local families this time, obvious reasons. Yeah, that's a huge bummer. Would have loved to be a part of this American culture I always heard of growing up. I heard you, Abhinav. I was actually thinking of that last week. Because they do that every Thanksgiving. That's a huge bummer. MCAT, I agree with you. Stuffing is the superior Thanksgiving food. How did the project go? So far, my team are working on part 5. Bit stuck on it. Okay. My group could not get the car to stay in the track at 3 degrees of steer. Oh, but remember, it's not 3 degrees of steer. That it's 3 degrees of tire slip angle. I think your steering angle is definitely going to be more than 3 degrees. Tim says, "Oh, snap!" Yeah, that's a game changer. Yeah. Yeah. 5 has been giving us some trouble, says Stonebuster. Okay, gotcha. Okay, how about we get through this content today, and then if you guys have questions on the project, I'll hang around for a couple minutes and we can talk about it. It'll be fun once you get it to work. Okay. So we're going to talk about modifying the lateral load transfer during cornering at your front versus your rear tires. So why do we care about that? Depending on the load transfer at the front or the rear, that can make your car more understeer or more oversteer. So tuning the load transfer is a way to dial in some of the handling characteristics that you want. And neutral steer is the goal in cornering, because that's the way to get maximum value out of your front and rear tires. All right. Here we go. So let's start with how much your chassis will roll during cornering. Okay. And I'm going to put a negative sign out in front of this. And I missed this before. I think I forgot the negative sign before. Okay, so the roll angle is your mass times your lateral acceleration times the height of your CG above the roll center divided by the sum of your front and rear roll rates. So this is height of CG above the roll axis. The roll axis is the straight line that connects the front and rear roll centers. And you know, your CG is somewhere towards the middle of the car, and it'll be some height above that line. And then we have the front roll rate. And the front roll rate, this is just like a torsion spring. This is saying how much torque does my suspension provide on my chassis per roll angle. So it's kind of like Hooke's law. If you roll a little bit, the suspension is going to push back on you with a torque. And so the roll rate describes how much torque per roll. And this is your rear roll rate. So obviously, like, the bigger these roll rates are, the stiffer your suspension springs, the smaller your roll angle is going to be. Okay, so I want to point out something. Notice the negative sign out in the front. I said I missed this before. There's a negative sign because a positive roll angle should indicate counterclockwise rotation about the BX axis. So that's the axis coming out of the nose of your car. So it's pointing out of your windshield. So by the right-hand rule, a positive roll should be a counterclockwise rotation about that axis. So I'll show this with some pictures below, but positive lateral acceleration, which means turning right, that should actually create a negative roll angle. And then the opposite of that is if you have negative lateral acceleration and you're turning left, that should create a positive roll angle. So let's take a look at what this looks like. I have a Corvette here, and it's cornering, and you can see that there's a little bit of body roll, and they're in the opposite directions here. So, okay, this one, it's kind of like rolled a little bit this way. And the BX axis is coming towards us out of the nose of the car. Oh, this color doesn't show up well. Let's do this. So here the Corvette is rotating counterclockwise about that axis, right? So this is a positive roll angle. Okay, but question for you in the chat. Which direction is this Corvette cornering? Is it to the driver's right or to the driver's left? Is he making a right or a left-hand turn from the perspective of the driver? And the driver is sitting right here. Okay, good. Right, because the weight's gonna like roll towards your outside tires. So we're definitely turning this way to the driver's left, but that means the lateral acceleration is less than 0. So if you're turning left, you have negative lateral acceleration. Whoa, Belkit, what happened there? Okay, that's better. That's better. Okay, so we have counterclockwise rotation about BX. That's positive roll. And then just to be complete here, now we're turning right. That's a negative roll angle because it's clockwise about this body axis. And okay, so now we're turning. Our lateral acceleration is to the right, which is greater than 0. Okay. Looked at wrong orientation for a second. It's okay. I forgive you. I mean, I almost didn't forgive you, but now I forgave you. Okay, so the amount of roll you get per lateral acceleration in a car, it's called the roll gradient. And so let's look at this table here, because this will give you an idea. I think we mentioned this last time, but if you're in a passenger car, you're going to get about 8 degrees of body roll per G of lateral acceleration. So you get a decent amount of roll, and that's because the suspension in a passenger car is a little bit softer. That improves the ride of the car. When you go over bumps, you feel it a little bit less, but a softer suspension also allows your car to roll a little bit more. So if we're talking about a sports car, probably like a Corvette or something, maybe 3 degrees of body roll per G of lateral acceleration. And then by the time we get to Formula One, it's going to be like 1 degree. Is there a symbol for the roll gradient that we use? That's a great question, Benny. I bet there is a symbol, but I don't know what it is. So I've just been using that ratio. If somebody finds some symbol, I would appreciate it. But I haven't found it. Now, the reason that an F1 car has such little roll has to do with load transfer, but it also has to do with the aerodynamics of the F1 car. They're very particular about how the car is aligned with the pavement, and there's very little space there. So if you get some body roll, you're gonna like bottom out. Excuse me. Okay, so today we want to talk about what's going to be the relative load transfer at the front and the rear. So let's just say we're given a roll angle to start. And so what we're going to do here, we have the BX axis pointing out towards us. And okay, so the driver would be like over here on the left side of the car. And so this roll angle, this is a negative roll angle, which means that we have positive lateral acceleration and we are turning to the right. Okay, so all right. So what I want to do, I think I have it written down here. We're going to calculate the net moment acting on the front axle. All right. But we're going to take this moment about the front roll center. So it's the moments acting on this axle, but we're taking the moments about the front roll center. And let's just assume that this is the front roll center. Okay, so this is going to be some height above the ground. The symbol for this is height of the seed. Wait, that's not it. That's not it. We use this. Height of the roll center at the front. All right. So we're going to sum the moments about the front roll center, and there's three main force contributors to the moment on the axle. So first we're going to put in the lateral forces. So we're turning to the right, so there's a lateral force in that direction at this is the left front tire. So I'll call it lateral force at the left front tire. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the right front tire. Lateral force at the right front tire. All right, so these are our first contributors to the moment about that roll center. So they act over a moment arm that's the height of the roll center at the front. Okay. So the next contributors, let's stick with the tire forces. We're going to have the normal loads on the tires. Those are also going to produce a moment on the axle. And we're taking this moment about the front roll center. So I'm going to draw the arrow like this. So FZ at the left front. But this is going to be, I have to put the minus sign here because FZ is defined in the positive Z direction, which is down. So if I'm going to draw the arrow up, I have to indicate that this is a minus FZ at the left front tire. Let's do the same thing over here. Minus FZ at the right front tire. Now the distance so we're going to define these forces acting at the center of each tire. So the distance between these is the track width at the front. And generally the track width at the front and the rear is very close, but it might differ by a couple inches. All right. So then if we're looking at the moment that these forces create on the axle about the front roll center, our moment arm for both of these is going to be half the front track width. So that's the moment arm for each of those forces. Okay, so that's the second contributors of moments. We have the lateral force acting over a moment arm, the height of the roll center at the front. We have the normal forces acting over a moment arm, the half the track width at the front. Now the last contributors to the moment on the axle is going to come from your suspension springs. All right. So like when the body's rolling, we see that this spring was compressed. Maybe we'll call it a distance delta Z. And so what is the axle going to feel? It's going to feel like that compression, like pushing down here at wherever that spring attachment point is. I'm pushing into the spring, and then the spring pushes into the axle. And then over here, this spring is getting stretched by a same distance if we're assuming it's symmetrical on both sides. So now the chassis is pulling up on this spring, and so the axle is going to feel, you know, that force pulling up. So it's going to be like pushing down on this left side of the car and pulling up on the right side. All right. And the way we can describe the moment this creates on the axle, you could either have the forces acting over the distance, which is, I think we called this the distance between the springs at the front, but we would divide it by 2 because it's the halfway point. So you could have the spring force acting over half that distance, or we defined the front roll rate, which is the moment produced by the front suspension per degree of roll. So, you know, we have an angle in here, minus theta. So the way I'm going to include the moment here is I'm actually going to use the front roll rate. So I'll say that the moment is the front roll rate times that angle. Okay. Here we go. So we're gonna do the moments acting on the axle about the roll center, and we're gonna say that these moments are balanced. So we're just stuck in a corner with the body rolling a certain amount. So first I'm gonna have the moment from the lateral forces. So you can see that the lateral forces are going this way to the right, and they're going to tend to produce a clockwise moment about on the axle about the roll center. So that's a negative moment. So I'm going to have minus lateral force from the right front plus lateral force from the left front acting over the height of the roll center at the front. So that's the lateral tire force moment on the axle. Now we're going to move on to the normal force. So the left front tire is going to make a positive moment. If you look at the picture, it's going to want to push the axle counterclockwise. So we have that up arrow, but it was minus FZ left front. And it was acting over a moment arm, the track width at the front over 2. And then we need to subtract the moment from the other side of the car because that other tire is going to produce a moment in the opposite direction. So this is the right front tire normal load, but it acts over the same distance. Okay, and then finally, we're going to have the moment from the suspension springs themselves. So, this moment created by the suspension springs on the front axle, you can see like this one's pushing down, this one's pushing up. That wants to create a moment on the front axle this way, which is clockwise. So that's a negative moment on the front axle. So the way we're going to account for this Like I said, we're going to use the roll rate at the front. So minus the roll rate times the roll angle, which is minus V. And so we have the moments from all three contributions here. Here we're going to make some substitutions to simplify this expression a bit. So I'm going to do this in each part in sequence. So we're going to start with the front lateral force, that first moment that we looked at. So we know that the sum of the lateral forces from the right front and left front tires, we just call this the total lateral force at the front tires, FYF. Now, I'm going to bring in the yaw moment balance. You'll see why I'm doing this. So if the moment about the z-axis of the car is balanced from the front and the rear, like we're not spinning out, then the moment from the front about the CG should be equal to the moment from the rear. Those two moments should be balanced in yaw if we're not spinning out. So what I'm going to do, this means I could write the rear lateral tire force in terms of the front. Okay. Now, if we look at the total lateral force equation, we know that the mass of the car times its lateral acceleration should be, if we're just looking at small angles here, the sum of the front and rear lateral tire forces. But here, I can write the rear tire force in terms of the front. So this is FYF plus LF over LR FYF. So I'm just making that substitution. And this is why I'm doing this. This is pretty cool. Using this equation right here, I can write the front lateral force in terms of LR over L times mass times lateral acceleration. If you're wondering where this L comes from, if you look at this right-hand side, I could write this as LR over LR FYF plus LF over LR FYF. So this becomes LR plus LF over LR FYF. And the sum of these distances is just the wheelbase, L. And then I divide by this term to get FYF by itself. So, question for you again. What is this term? LR over L. We have another name for this. There we go, Chen. This is the front weight ratio. Okay, so your front lateral tire force is your front weight ratio times the mass times the acceleration. That kind of makes sense. Okay. So let's keep going here. So we're going to substitute this up into our moment balance up above. Now, when we get through this in a couple minutes, the goal is we're solving for the load transfer at the front. So that's our end goal here. Oh, good. Yeah. So moving on to the normal load, we're going to make this substitution into the expression. So the normal load at the left front tire, you could write it like this. FZ front not. I know I have subscripts on subscripts right there. But what this is the static load for each front tire. So if the car's just sitting on the pavement, it's not cornering or anything, the normal load on the right front and left front tires, they would just be equal to the static load at the front. And you can calculate that static load from the front weight distribution. Okay, but we're going to define this. During cornering, we have load transfer, FZ at the front. And so I'm just going to define it this way. We're going to say the left front normal load is the static load plus this delta. The right front normal load is the static load minus this delta. Now you're going to see when we get so we're going to be solving for this expression at the end of this, the amount of normal load. And you'll see that depending on the direction you corner, so if you're turning right, you'll have positive AY. If you're turning left, you'll have negative AY. The sign of this term is going to automatically adjust depending on the direction of cornering. It'll either subtract load or add load. Okay, so that'll be cool. So we have that normal load. Now let's talk about the suspension moment. So the moment from the suspension was minus the front roll rate times that roll angle. And we have an expression for that roll angle, which we had at the top of these notes here. So I'm going to substitute that in here. So the minus roll angle is the mass times the lateral acceleration times the height of the CG above the roll axis divided by the total roll rate. I'll put a box around this too. Okay, so now we made a couple expressions to substitute into our moment balance. So I'm going to do that right now. And then we'll be able to simplify this expression even further. And it's a really cool expression that you get a lot of insight out of. Okay, so here is the moment from the lateral force. It's that front weight distribution times the height of the roll axis at the front times mass times lateral acceleration. And then the moment from the normal loads, we're going to make this substitution. We have the track width over 2 times, we have that static normal load minus this load transfer. And then the other tire, it produced a moment in the other direction. And this one was, we added that load transfer. And we can pause here and notice something cool. This term and this term are going to cancel. So I'm gonna swipe that out. Okay, and then we have the moment from the suspension. So I have minus k phi f over k phi f plus k phi r times mass times lateral acceleration times the height of the CG above the roll axis. Okay, so we're gonna gather some terms here because you can see that like this moment has mass times acceleration. This one also has mass times acceleration. So we can gather some terms. So we're gonna get 0, because all of this sums up to 0, is minus mass times lateral acceleration times my front weight distribution, LR over L, times the height of the roll center at the front, plus K phi F over K phi F plus K phi R, times the height of the CG above the roll axis. And then from this normal load stuff, the only thing that's left over, because a lot of this canceled out, is I have the track width at the front times this load transfer. Oh, wait. That's what I was going to use this 0 equals for. Good gravy. Let's just move this down. That's what the 0 equals was for. Okay, so now we can solve for this term. That's the golden goose. That's what we were looking for. The load transfer at the front. So it's going to be minus mass times lateral acceleration divided by the track width at the front. LR over L times the height of the roll center at the front. K phi F over K phi F plus K phi R times the height of the CG above the roll axis. There's a lot to unpack here. Or there's 4 key things. Okay, something we pointed out earlier. LR over L, front weight ratio. This ratio is called the front roll stiffness distribution. And that makes sense. It's kind of like the front weight distribution, because here's the total roll rate, and then this is the front divided by that total. So it's like the portion of the roll stiffness allocated to the front suspension. K phi F over K phi F plus K phi R is the front roll stiffness distribution. Now, if you go through this whole process at the rear axle, you get a very similar expression. So let's just fill that out before we start talking about each of these guys. I'll try to get both of these on the same screen here. So it's going to be same, minus mass times lateral acceleration. But now you're going to have the rear track width, which often it's very similar to the front. And then you're going to have LF over L here, which is the rear weight distribution. And then you have the height of the roll center at the rear axle. Maybe I'll just zoom in here. And then you have plus the rear roll stiffness distribution, K phi R, K phi F plus K phi R. And this term is the same, the height of the CG above the roll axis. First thing to check here. Let's look at this one, the front again. If I'm turning right, this term will be positive. And then overall, this will be a negative number. All right, so just keep that in your mind. We're turning right. I'm going to get a negative number for this. So let's go back here, because I want to make sure this works. Okay, so if we're turning right, that means that my left tires are my outside tires. And the static normal load is going to be a negative number. And then we're going to get a negative number for this. And so that's going to make it more negative, and so we're gaining load here. Converse, if we're turning left, then we'll have negative lateral acceleration, but overall delta FZF will be positive, and so we'll lose load here. So I just want to point that out, that these formulas automatically account for the direction of cornering, which is nice as well. Okay, so now we're going to point out the four main features of these equations, which give us a ton of insight. All right, so let's look at this first. If I reduce the track width at the front axle, meaning if I move the front tires closer together, that is going to increase the load transfer at that axle. On the other hand, if I spread the front tires out, that's going to reduce the load transfer at that axle. So that's the first observation. How about we write this down? Okay, increasing the track width at an axle, so that could be front or rear, that reduces the load transfer at that axle. All right, so that's our first observation. Let's make another observation. Let's look at the roll center height at an axle. If I reduce the roll center height at an axle, that'll reduce the load transfer at that axle. You put the roll center closer to the ground at the front, you get less load transfer at the front. Magic. It's not magic. So reducing the roll center height at an axle, front or rear, reduces the load transfer at that axle. What's the next one? Reducing the roll stiffness distribution. Oh, okay. So here we have the front roll stiffness distribution. It's the proportion of stiffness at your front suspension versus the total roll stiffness. If I reduce the stiffness of the front suspension, I actually reduce the load transfer at the front. That one's it's a little trickier but we'll talk. We have an example about that a little bit later. Okay, so if you reduce the roll stiffness distribution at an axle, so you soften the suspension at that axle, you reduce the relative load transfer at that axle. Okay. And then, fourth observation. So this is the front weight distribution. If I reduce the front weight distribution, that's going to reduce the load transfer at the front. So basically, the closer your CG is to a given axle, the more load transfer that's going to happen at that axle. If your CG is closer to your front tires, you're going to get more load transfer up at the front. So reducing the weight distribution at an axle reduces the load transfer at that axle. Okay, so I want to point out one conceptual thing here, and it comes back to tires. All right, so we're talking about increasing or reducing the relative load transfer at an axle. Like, what would motivate me to change the load transfer at an axle? Okay, so here, we'll squeeze this in here. Okay. Increased load transfer at an axle reduces the net cornering stiffness of the tires at that axle. So we did an example to illustrate this with a Formula SAE car. When load is transferring, you put more weight on one tire, and that increases the cornering stiffness or the grip at that outside tire, but the inside tire loses load and it loses grip. So even though one tire's gaining grip and one tire's losing grip, the net effect is that it actually loses more grip than when it was just statically loaded. Okay, so we increase the load transfer at an axle, we reduce the net cornering stiffness at that axle. So if we increase load transfer at front, the front cornering stiffness is going to go down a little bit relative to the rear. You know, the other side of that coin, increase load transfer at rear. By that argument regarding the tires, the rear cornering stiffness is going to go down a little bit relative to the front. Okay, so the next piece, like how this connects to vehicle handling, is the understeer gradient of the car is the mass divided by the wheelbase times CRLR minus C alpha F LF, which is the in beta. It's called the directional stability derivative. Dang, I keep forgetting what it's called. But this is the key term here. And then obviously this is divided by the product of the cornering stiffnesses. But by because if the understeer gradient is less than 0, we call our car oversteer. If it's greater than 0, we're understeer, and so on. So by tweaking the values of the cornering stiffness, you're playing with the understeer gradient of your car. So let's say that you are like, man, my car is too understeer. I have to put too much steering into this corner. I would like to reduce the amount of understeer. Something you can do, if I want to reduce the amount of understeer, well, I could make my rear cornering stiffness smaller, right? If I make this term smaller, then I'm subtracting, and my understeer gradient gets smaller, so I move more towards oversteer. So let's do a practical example here. I know we have just a couple minutes left. You guys have probably heard of an anti-roll bar, sometimes called a sway bar. So let me tell you what an anti-roll bar does. It increases the roll rate at a given axle. So it'll either increase K phi F, the roll rate at the front, or you could increase the roll rate at the rear. You could make your rear more stiff. Okay, so yeah. If you add a front anti-roll bar, adding a front anti-roll bar increases the front roll rate, K phi F. Notice this also increases the front roll stiffness distribution. That just means a greater portion of your overall roll stiffness of the car is now at the front axle. Front roll stiffness distribution. So I'm saying this ratio goes up. The ratio of the front roll rate to the total roll rate. Boom. Now, if we go back to our expression for the load transfer at the front, here we go. If you pump up this number here, you're going to get more load transfer at the front. Okay, so the anti-roll bar, this is what it looks like. You can have it at the front or the rear. At the rear, it acts like a torsion spring that adds additional torsional stiffness, which just means resistance to roll at a given axle. So I mean, you could I kind of colored it in pink here. So it's separate from your main like suspension coils. It's an additional thing that actually reaches from one side of the car to the other. And so like imagine this. Let's say that the car is rolling and it's like pushing this side of the bar up. So imagine this thing, this arm like rotating up a little bit. So if I deform this, I rotate it up. Maybe I'll like erase this and just... Okay, so now it's got bent. So this thing, it's gonna resist being bent. It's elastic, and what it wants to do is regain its original shape. So to regain its original shape, it's gonna produce a torsional moment like in the reverse direction that's gonna try to like push it back down. Okay. So basically, I mean, the same thing would happen over here. Like anytime one of these lever arms is pushed up or down by body roll, this bar is going to want to create a moment that counteracts that rolling motion. Okay, so for a given chassis roll angle, the increased stiffness at this axle is going to increase the load transfer at this axle. So remember, one of our assumptions here is when we get some body roll, that chassis body roll is consistent from front to rear. If the front rolls a certain angle phi, the rear is also going to roll that same angle phi. Maybe I can pull up a picture really quick. Will it be here? Oh, I don't know what I did with it. Oh, I see what I did. Aha! Okay. I know this picture's a little cluttered here. Maybe I can just erase a bunch and like clear it up. But anyways, you see here we got like this isometric perspective. And I got this roll angle that's consistent all the way from front to rear. So that means the roll angle at the front and the rear, it's the same. So if the front has greater roll stiffness, for that same roll angle, that's going to produce a greater moment on the axle. Because it's like I have effectively, I could think of the anti-roll bar as, it's not beefing up these springs, but it has the same effect in terms of roll. So if I take a really stiff spring and compress it this same amount, that's going to put more force on the axle than if I compress a really weak spring that same amount. So I think that's the way I think of an anti-roll bar. I'm going to get this angle of roll. An anti-roll bar adds overall stiffness in roll to your vehicle, so your overall roll angle will be less, but still in proportion to the axle that doesn't have an anti-roll bar, you're going to get more load transfer at that axle. Okay, so I got to go back here. Okay, so the increased stiffness increases the load transfer at the axle where you have an anti-roll bar. So adding a front anti-roll bar increases load transfer at the front axle, which decreases, because if I increase the load transfer, I decrease the front cornering stiffness, and that's going to make the car more... What is it going to do? Here's our roll understeer gradient. If I make this number smaller, I make my car more understeer because I'm subtracting less. Adding a rear anti-roll bar increases load transfer at the rear axle, reducing its cornering stiffness during cornering, and it makes the car more oversteer. So often I'll see anti-roll bars on trucks at the rear. Like I was taking a walk this morning. Yeah, let's look here. Yeah, this is the rear of the truck, right? So yeah, it looks like this. It links across both sides. This one looks really beefy. But if you see an anti-roll bar at the rear on a truck, that reduces cornering stiffness at the rear, and you know that the designers added this to make the car more oversteer. Because on its own, it has too much understeer. So yeah, adding that, I don't understand why it's a solid axle. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so if you want to make your car more oversteer, why do they call anti-roll or sway bar? There's no difference, right? Would a sway bar for a camper act in the same way, or does it act in a different manner since it's right by the hitch and not by an axle? I'm just curious. I'm trying to visualize this sway bar for camper towing. Are you talking about, oh, like this kind of thing? Oh, just different jargon for the same thing? Gotcha. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so if your hitch rolls, those are load levelers. Well, I think for this, when you're looking at this arm is a spring, effectively. right? Because like if the camper were to like roll and pull on this chain, it's gonna pull on this arm, and then this arm is gonna want to go back to its original position, so it'll pull down. So yeah, that's effectively gonna reduce, I mean, it's gonna increase the roll stiffness of your camper in a way. Like if your camper rolls, this is gonna be the spring that resists it, because if you pull that chain, this arm is gonna pull back down. It helps prevent sag in rear suspension. So I think that'll increase. Yeah, I think Benny, I think it acts in the same way. But it will increase load transfer at your rear tires. And it'll make you more oversteer, I think. Yeah, it's basically like helping your camper have more roll stiffness by taking some of the load onto your vehicle. Jeeps disconnect sway bars for more articulation. Oh yeah, if you're gonna be doing some off-road stuff, you want to allow relative travel of your tires. This is more so like a sway bar, that's more racing or just flat road conditions. Phil says they set extra tension. Yeah, that's really cool. But I think it's this, yeah, same principle here. A camper anti-sway? What is this? Okay, so this is the kind of thing we were looking at. Yeah, isn't this the same thing? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's how they advertise it. Do you want your camper to flip over? I didn't think so. Get a sway bar. Yeah, I think they're the same thing. Linear brake pad, basically. Yeah. It's very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Guys, that is our content for today. Oh, the anti-roll bar for the camper and the camper anti-sway are used together. Yeah, I guess different mechanisms working towards the same goal. Guys, I hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving. You've been working hard. Time to get a little break. Recuperate, refresh yourself. And then you'll come back and we just have 2 weeks of class. Oh man. Hey, happy Thanksgiving, Benny. Happy Thanksgiving, Chen. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, says Abhinav. Hey, Jenna, have an amazing Thanksgiving. Phil, you're sent home from work? You get some time off? Hey, Dennis the Menace, happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, Belcut. Oh, Phil, you're working in your living room. Hey, a good change of pace. I know. COVID, man. No thanks. I hope we resolve that in the coming months as soon as we can. No thanks. We are so tired of it. It's old. Low-key don't want this course to end. I know. I'm having a good time with you guys. Vehicle dynamics, there's just so much interesting stuff too. I sent a project question through email. Oh, right. We wanted to maybe look at some project stuff. Let me open my email. Maybe I can check this out. Let's see here. Just in time for hunting season. Ooh. Oh, see. Let's see. I'm reading this. I'm reading it. It's coming out too high. Gotcha. Interesting. The slope of my steady state steering angle is coming out too high. Okay, and you verified they came out the same, different methods. Understood graded differently. Oh, you know what? What it might be is that the load, it might be the load. Like, are you considering the FZ to be the load on both front tires? Because I think that's what it needs to be consistent with my results. Like the cornering stiffness equation that I give, where it has FZ in there, the FZ is the load on both tires. I wonder if, did you do that? Oh, you think that's what you did? Okay. Steering wheel. Dang, I'm not sure. Oh wait, cornering stiffness. Oh, wait a second. Your vertical forces. I think that's the problem. You're having the weight, like FZR, you're having it mg times LF. But it shouldn't be times LF. It should be times LF divided by L. That's got to be it. Or wait, LR. Yeah. Yeah, because if you multiply the weight just by that length, that's actually a moment. You want it to be times a distribution, or like a ratio. Does anybody else have any quick questions on the project? Whoa, do you guys see that my chat is going crazy? That thing on the bottom? I'm gonna turn that off. That makes... Came out perfect now? Thanks. Okay, cool. Okay, hold on. I gotta answer this. Okay. LMK. I'm having a brain block on how exactly we're supposed to code part 5. I've been looking at it for hours. Can't seem to figure it out. And Belkut has a similar question. Isn't 5 using the vehicle simulation code pretty much? Yeah, so part 5, Abhinav has a good point. Like, it is similar to homework 7. In homework 7, we simulated the motion of the vehicle, but we were using the linear tire model. So the difference with this project is that, we're simulating the motion again, but we're using a bilinear tire model. What I suggest doing is using like an Euler forward method and basically, okay, let's hold on here. So you have your bicycle model equations. Oh wait, this chat thing at the bottom of the page is going crazy. Turn that off. Basically you have, like r dot equals something. And you can also make another equation like beta dot equals something. So these are your bicycle model equations. And in here, these are functions of fyf and fyr. Now, when we simulated for like homework 7, we just assumed the linear tire model, which says this: that the front or the rear lateral force is the negative of the cornering stiffness times the slip angle. The difference this time is that the linear tire model only holds when your slip angle is less than the saturating slip angle of 3 degrees. So in your code, you're going to need like an if statement to see what the lateral force should be. Because like if alpha f, let's say it's like less than minus 3 degrees, then FYF is just minus C alpha F times the saturating slip angle. So, but you should do this in radians, right? And then if alpha F is greater than 3 degrees times this, right? But then like else, if it's in between these, then you just use the linear tire model. So I think you make like a for loop where you're using the Euler forward method. But one of the first things that you check in the for loop is, what is my current slip angle? And how do you get the slip angle? Well, I give you some equations in the project, like alpha F equals blah blah blah. It's a function of like the yaw rate, the steering angle, and so on and so forth. But it's important here that this is a function of your steer angle, because when you start to turn and introduce steering, that is going to create a slip angle, and then that slip angle is going to create a lateral force, and that's what's going to get this car turning. Okay, I have to run to a Zoom meeting. Talk with your groups. Grind through it. You can do it. You can do it. You have what it takes. All right, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Have a happy Thanksgiving.